My name is Valerie Lane. I am 68 years old, a retired elementary school librarian who has spent most of her life surrounded by soft voices, worn page edges, and the gentle rhythm of children learning to read. I live alone in a small, sun-warmed house in Tucson, Arizona, where the days stretch long and quiet. 1 month after my daughter's wedding, when I believed life had finally settled back into its calm routine, the phone rang. That call carried a sentence that swept every trace of peace out of my chest. The photographer from my daughter's wedding, Catherine Doyle, spoke in a strained voice that I had never heard before. She said, "Ma'am, I noticed something terrible in the wedding photos. Come immediately and do not say anything to your daughter." Those words stood still in the air like a storm cloud refusing to move. When she showed me what she had found, everything inside me shifted, as if the ground beneath Arizona's desert crust had cracked open. I remember gripping the edge of my kitchen counter. The wooden spoon my late husband used to stir his morning oatmeal lay beside the sink. The sunlight hit the spoon in a familiar way, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The sound of Catherine's breath through the phone trembled. Cars passed behind her somewhere in Phoenix. A door opened and shut as if she had stepped deeper into a truth she dreaded to reveal. And there I stood, a mother, a widow, a woman who had always tried to do the right thing, suddenly caught in the pull of a secret I had never asked to learn. What Catherine showed me that afternoon changed the way I looked at my daughter's marriage, her husband, and even the quiet choices I had made for years. It forced me to ask whether silence is kindness or a mistake that grows teeth in the dark. It pushed me toward a path I had never planned to walk, one lined with old wounds, half-spoken truths, and the heavy question of whether telling the truth could save someone you love or tear them apart. I did not know it then. But that moment would become the first step of a long and painful journey, a journey where quiet justice spoke louder than anger, a journey where I learned that sometimes mothers carry truths they never wish to see, and whether they whisper them or hold them back, those truths still find a way to rise. Before we begin this story, if you have ever known a quiet ache or carried a truth you were afraid to speak, I invite you to stay with me. If this story moves you, feel free to like this video, subscribe, and gently tap the bell so you will not miss the next chapter. Your support helps these stories reach others who may need them. Now let me take you back to the moment I drove to Phoenix, unaware that every mile would pull me closer to the truth that waited inside those wedding photos. Morning light filtered through the blinds in soft stripes, laying themselves across the kitchen table like gentle reminders of another quiet day in Tucson. I moved. Slowly, the way people my age often do, not because our bodies fail us, but because we have learned the value of unrushed moments. My hands reached for the wooden spoon, resting beside the stove. The spoon was old, smoothed by years of use, and belonged to my late husband, Nathan. He used it every morning to stir oatmeal while humming a tune with no name. That spoon carried the warmth of a life I once had, and holding it grounded me before the day unfolded. I stirred my own oatmeal the way he used to, small circles, steam rising, the familiar scent of cinnamon softening the sharp edges of the morning. The house was still. I lived in a modest desert home on the east side of Tucson, tucked between neighbors who were kind enough to wave but distant enough to leave room for solitude. After Emily's wedding in Phoenix, I thought I finally had space to breathe. Weddings drain mothers of a certain age, even when they are filled with pride. The phone rang. The sharp sound sliced through the quiet and made my fingers tighten around the spoon. I wiped my hand on a towel and answered. "This is Valerie." A breath trembled on the other end. Then Catherine Doyle's voice emerged, thin and strained. Catherine was the photographer hired for Emily's wedding. I remembered her as a woman with steady hands and an even steadier gaze. But the voice I heard now carried none of that steadiness. "Mrs. Lane, you need to come to my studio in Phoenix. Come alone. This cannot wait." Her words were clipped, urgent, almost afraid. In the background, I heard the muffled rush of Phoenix traffic, horns in the distance, someone calling out, a door creaking shut. Her breath hitched, as though she had stepped into a space where the truth pressed too hard against the walls. I froze at the sink, the spoon still in my hand. "Catherine, what is going on?" She exhaled shakily. "I know this is sudden. I know it is early. But I found something in the wedding photos, something you should see, and I need you to hear this clearly. Do not tell Emily you are coming." A cold weight settled in my stomach. The kitchen felt smaller. The sunlight dimmed. My heart thumped once, hard, a pulse of warning. For a moment, my mind drifted back to the wedding day in Phoenix. I saw Emily in her dress, radiant, glowing, overflowing with the hope young brides carry like a fragile lantern in the wind. I saw myself standing behind the scenes, adjusting tablecloths, making sure flowers were fresh, refilling water pitchers, checking every detail so Emily could simply enjoy her moment. I saw Jason, too, in his crisp suit, tall, charming, always stepping away from the reception to answer calls or whisper with groomsmen. He barely acknowledged me that day, though I tried to tell myself he was simply busy. Every mother convinces herself of small lies at weddings to keep the day intact. Catherine's voice snapped me back to the present. "Mrs. Lane, what I found will hurt you, but you deserve the truth." The words sank like a stone. Truth has a particular sound, and it is rarely gentle. I steadied myself against the counter. My voice stayed calm, though my chest tightened. "All right, I will come." Before she could say more, someone knocked at my front door. 2 slow taps followed by a third lighter one. Only one person knocked that way. My neighbor, Mabel Whitaker, 73 years old, soft silver bun pinned at the back of her head and eyes that always looked like they had already forgiven you for whatever pain you were carrying. I opened the door and she peered at me with her usual mix of concern and curiosity. "Morning, Val. I saw your lights on early. You're all right." I must have looked paler than I realized. I forced a small smile and stepped aside so she could enter. Mabel rarely came with urgency. She believed in gentle visits, the kind that lasted exactly as long as they needed to. She sat at the table, hands folded. "Something is bothering you. I can see it in your shoulders." I shook my head. "It is nothing. Just a call from Phoenix." Her eyes softened. "Being quiet is a choice, Val. Just be sure it is the right one." She meant it kindly, but the words stung in a way I did not expect. Silence has always been my refuge, my survival tool. After Nathan passed, silence was the only thing I had control over, but now Catherine had asked me to keep something from my own daughter, a secret before I even knew what the secret was. When Mabel left, the house felt colder. I washed the oatmeal bowl even though I had barely eaten. The spoon sat on the counter, a reminder of how quickly one phone call could break the fragile structure of a morning. I packed a small bag, slipped on sturdy shoes, and locked the door behind me. The air outside smelled like warm dust and mesquite. Tucson mornings were predictable. My life had been predictable too, until now. As I backed out of the driveway, a thought pierced me. Emily deserved happiness. She deserved a marriage built on truth. And yet, I was already keeping something from her. The viewers of this story may judge me for that choice. Some will say a mother should speak immediately. Others will say she should wait until she knows more. I stood at that crossroads, unsure which path would save my daughter and which path would shatter her. But I turned onto the highway toward Phoenix anyway, the road stretching wide and quiet ahead of me. And with each passing mile, the weight of Catherine's voice pressed heavier against my chest. Something terrible waited for me, and I was walking straight toward it. The drive from Tucson to Phoenix usually calms me. Miles of open desert, long ribbons of highway cutting through sandstone and dry brush, the sky wide enough to swallow every worry. But that morning, the landscape felt different. The desert seemed too large, yet my chest felt too small for the thoughts pressing inside it. Every saguaro cactus I passed stood like a silent witness, and each one reminded me that some things endure storms simply by standing still. I tried to take comfort in that, but the road offered no comfort. With each mile north, Catherine's trembling voice replayed in my mind. "Come alone. This cannot wait." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The heat outside shimmered across the asphalt, but inside the car, my hands felt cold. Nathan used to say the desert had a way of revealing what people tried to hide. I wondered what truth waited for me at Catherine's studio and why she sounded so afraid to say it aloud. When I reached Phoenix, the traffic swallowed me. Cars honked. People rushed in every direction. Life moved fast here, unlike the slow, steady rhythm of Tucson mornings. Catherine's studio sat in a renovated brick building tucked between a coffee shop and a florist. A small bell chimed when I stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and camera equipment. Catherine stood near a table, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment she hesitated, as if seeing me made the truth heavier. "Mrs. Lane, thank you for coming so quickly." Her voice wavered again. She motioned for me to follow her to the back room where her editing workstation sat. A laptop was open on the desk. Dozens of photo thumbnails glowed on the screen. Wedding images. Emily laughed. The bridal party posing, guests raising glasses. But Catherine did not touch any of those. Instead, she clicked a folder marked Pre-Ceremony. My stomach tightened. She opened one image, then zoomed in. The air in the room thinned. The photo showed Jason standing behind one of the garden arches at the venue. But he was not alone. A woman, someone I did not recognize, stood pressed close to him. His hand lingered near her waist, her face tilted toward his. Their expressions were unmistakably intimate. Not friendly, not accidental, not the behavior of a man about to marry my daughter. My breath caught, but I forced my voice to remain steady. When was this taken? Catherine swallowed hard. 2 hours before the ceremony. She tapped the corner of the screen where the metadata appeared. Timestamp, location tag, camera data. Everything lined up exactly as a wedding photographer would document. This was not speculation. This was evidence. Silent strength. That is what I tried to hold on to. My chest ached, but my face stayed calm. I kept my hands folded so Catherine would not see them shake. She clicked the next image, then another. Each one showed the same truth from different angles. Jason whispered into the woman's ear. The woman brushed lint from his jacket, a closeness that had no place in a groom's final hours before promising loyalty to my daughter. My thoughts drifted unwillingly to the ceremony itself. The flashback came sharp and vivid. Emily stepped into the sunlight, her veil catching the breeze. She looked more alive than I had ever seen her. She squeezed my hands and whispered, "Mom, today feels perfect." She glowed, with the kind of joy that makes a mother want to freeze time. Meanwhile, Jason had been slipping away every few minutes. I had noticed the small disappearances, but I brushed them aside. Weddings are chaotic, I told myself. People get pulled in every direction. I had chosen not to look deeper. Back in the studio, Catherine shut her laptop as if she could not bear to see the images anymore. I tried to approach Emily that day. I tried to tell her, but Jason stopped me backstage. Her voice cracked. He said I misunderstood. He asked me to keep things professional. I believed him for a moment, but the guilt would not go away. I thought about calling Emily afterward, but I was afraid of being wrong. Her confession pierced me. The idea that she had tried to warn my daughter. The idea that Jason had intercepted the truth before it reached her. A wave of anger rose in me, but I pushed it down. Anger never helped me think clearly. I pressed my palms against my thighs and steadied my breath. "What do you believe now, Catherine?" She hesitated for only a second. "I believe Emily deserves to know, and I believe you are the only one who can tell her without causing a disaster." The words hit me harder than the images. My heart twisted. Should I tell Emily and shatter her world, or stay silent until I understood the whole story? If I spoke too soon, I could break something that might never heal. If I waited too long, I might allow her to step deeper into a life built on lies. I stood there between two impossible paths, a mother's dilemma, a moral conflict that had no clear right answer. Catherine rubbed her hands together nervously. "Whatever you decide, Mrs. Lane, I am sorry, truly sorry." I nodded, but inside I felt like the ground of the Arizona desert had cracked beneath me. I gathered the strength I had left, thanked her, and walked out into the Phoenix sun. The heat hit my face, but it did nothing to thaw the cold weight inside my chest. As I reached my car, I whispered to myself, what will hurt her more? The truth today or the truth tomorrow? The question lingered like dust in the air as I drove away. I sat in my parked car outside Catherine's studio for several minutes, letting the heat settle across the windshield like a thick blanket. I needed those minutes. The images Catherine had shown me replayed behind my eyes in sharp detail. Jason, the woman, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that left no room for doubt. I had promised myself I would not jump to conclusions, but truth has its own weight, and this truth was heavy. Before driving away, I opened my phone and stared again at the photos Catherine had sent me as temporary files. I zoomed in on the woman, a red dress, a wedding band, shoulders slightly hunched as if pulled forward by something she wanted and feared at the same time. Her hand rested near Jason's shirt collar, fingers tense, as if she had just adjusted it. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. The red dress bothered me. It stood out against the soft pastels of the wedding theme. It demanded attention even in a still frame. Something about it felt deliberate. Red is not a color people wear casually at a wedding unless they want to be seen, or unless they are clinging to something they should have already let go of. I enlarged the image again. The woman's face was angled, but not enough to obscure her completely. Dark hair, light makeup, a small freckle near her jaw. I searched my memory, but I could not recall seeing her at the ceremony or the reception. Yet she clearly knew Jason well, too well. I needed answers, so I went back inside the studio. Catherine was talking to someone now, a man in his 40s wearing a denim shirt and a badge that read Studio Manager. He looked up as I approached. "Mrs. Lane, this is my manager, Evan Pierce." Catherine's voice was steadier now, but her hands were still clasped tightly in front of her. Evan nodded politely before turning serious. "Catherine told me what happened. She also told me something else that you need to know." His tone held a warning. I braced myself. The woman in the red dress came here the day after the wedding. She was upset, crying, asking if any photos of her had been taken. She wanted everything deleted. Catherine winced. She begged me. I had never seen someone so desperate. I felt the back of my throat tighten. Why would she be that desperate unless she was hiding something she had no right to be part of? I asked quietly. "Did you delete them?" Evan shook his head. "Not without the client's permission. Your daughter and son-in-law were the clients. We cannot erase anything unless they authorize it." Catherine looked at the floor. The woman got more upset. She said someone could get hurt if the photos got out. She kept repeating that she never meant for things to go this far. My heart thudded painfully. This so far confirmed everything I feared. Then Evan added, "There is more." Jason came in 2 hours later and asked to see all the photos from the pre-ceremony folder. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment as if reliving the discomfort. He asked how many backups we kept. He offered me money to keep quiet until he could figure out how to manage it. He did not want Emily to see anything yet. The word money sliced through whatever hope I had left. Jason had not simply made a mistake. He had tried to cover it up, and he had dragged other people into his secrecy, all while smiling through wedding vows he had no intention of honoring. I felt the room tilt. Silent strength. I reached for it again, holding on to the calm I had learned to carry. Nathan used to say that when something feels off, don't rush. Watch quietly. People will reveal themselves if you give them the space to do it. I remembered him standing by our old blue truck, brushing desert dust off the hood. He said it after a neighbor tried to sell us a car with a forged title. Nathan never confronted the man, angrily. He simply listened, asked small questions, and watched. And within minutes, the truth unraveled without him having to raise his voice. That was Nathan's way, that slow patience, that quiet certainty. I had admired him for it, and now, standing in Catherine's studio, I knew I needed that same patience more than ever. I asked Catherine, "Did she give a name?" The woman in the red dress. Catherine glanced at Evan before nodding. She emailed the studio afterward, asking again if the photos could be removed. We logged her information in the system. She hesitated before turning the screen toward me. "Here is the email she used, The name hit me in the chest like a sudden drop in altitude. Hannah Carter. Carter. I stared at the screen, the letters burning into my vision. Carter was Jason's last name. The same last name Emily had just taken. The same name printed in gold script across their wedding invitations. For a moment, all sound drifted away. The hum of the studio lights, the muffled traffic outside, even the movement of Catherine's breath seemed to fall silent. My thoughts tangled into a knot of disbelief and dread. Was she a relative? A sister-in-law? A cousin? Or something far more dangerous? The truth seemed too large to fit inside the small room. I lifted my gaze to Catherine. "Are you absolutely sure this is the woman from the photos?" Catherine nodded slowly. 100%. Something inside me shifted. The mystery was no longer just about infidelity. Now it was tied to family, to the Carter name, to something deeper and more tangled than I had imagined. I thanked them both, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. As I stepped out into the heat of the Phoenix sun again, I felt the world tilt under my feet. The truth had widened, and whatever waited ahead was far more complicated than a single betrayal captured in a photograph. The drive back to Tucson felt longer than the drive to Phoenix, even though the miles were the same. The desert stretched out in every direction, a wide and endless quiet, yet inside me everything felt tight and crowded. Every image Catherine had shown me pressed against the edges of my mind. Jason's hand near the woman's waist, her wedding band, the red dress, and the name that had stunned me, Hannah Carter, the same last name my daughter had just taken with so much pride. The sun was beginning to dip toward late afternoon by the time I reached my neighborhood. Tucson light softens in the evening, turning the desert gold. Normally it soothed me, but today the silence felt foreign, as if my home no longer recognized me. When I stepped inside, the air was still. My house always held a gentle stillness since Nathan passed, but this silence felt colder, heavier. My eyes drifted toward the old armchair near the window, Nathan's chair. The fabric had faded from years of Arizona sun. I used to find comfort in imagining him sitting there, reading or listening to a baseball game. But today that chair felt like an accusation, as if it was asking me why I had not spoken sooner, why I had let so much slip past me without question. I set my bag down and took a slow breath. I needed to hear my daughter's voice. Even a brief hello would steady me. I called Emily. The line rang once, twice. Then I went to voicemail. Moments later, a text appeared. "Mom, I'm busy. Jason and I have plans. I'll call later." No emojis, no warmth, just distance. A distance I had been trying to ignore for months. I stared at the screen for a long moment. She did not know what I knew. She did not see the photos I had seen. She did not feel the shift in her own marriage. Not yet. My first instinct was to call again, to send the images, to force the truth into the open, but something inside me whispered for patience. Nathan's voice, steady and sure, came back to me. When something feels off, don't rush, watch quietly. So I stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of caution. Emily deserved the full truth, not the scattered pieces I had so far, and she deserved to receive it when her heart could actually hold it. As I slipped my phone into my pocket, someone knocked on the door, the familiar 3 taps followed by a softer one. Mabel. I opened the door and she appeared dressed in her usual floral shirt, holding a small tin of cookies like she always did when she sensed something was wrong. Her eyes studied my face the way only long-time neighbors can. "Val, sweetheart, you look like you have been carrying a boulder on your back." I stepped aside to let her in. She made herself comfortable at the kitchen table and motioned for me to sit. I brewed tea because tea was easier than words. She waited, never pushing, never demanding details I was not ready to offer. When I finally sat across from her, she reached out and set her hand lightly over mine. "Being quiet is not a weakness, Val. It is choosing your moment." The words settled in me like a soft weight. They echoed the lessons Nathan had left behind. They reminded me that silence is not always an absence. Sometimes it is preparation. I met her eyes, but what if waiting makes it worse? She squeezed my hand. "Then you honor the truth when it comes. Not before, not after. Her calmness steadied me. For a few minutes, we simply sipped tea and watched the evening light stretch across the kitchen floor. Outside, the desert wind rustled lightly against the windows. Inside, the house felt less hostile, more like a place where difficult truths could be held safely for a while. When Mabel finally stood to leave, she gave me that familiar look of gentle insistence. "You do not have to carry everything alone. Come over tomorrow morning. I will make blueberry muffins." I nodded, grateful in ways I could not easily express. After she left, the house returned to silence, but this silence felt different, less sharp, more thoughtful. I walked into the living room and sat in Nathan's chair, letting the fabric creak beneath my weight. I closed my eyes and let the day replay through my mind. The drive to Phoenix, Catherine's trembling hands, the woman in the red dress, the last name that linked her to Jason. All of it felt like a puzzle I had never agreed to play, yet one I was now forced to solve. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Emily had posted a new photo. I opened it with a pit in my stomach. It was a picture of Emily and Jason standing on a balcony at a restaurant in Phoenix. Jason's arm was wrapped around her waist, and Emily leaned into him with the same trusting brightness she had on her wedding day. The caption read, "Perfect marriage, perfect weekend, feeling blessed." My heart tightened. She believed it. She believed she was living her happiest chapter, and I was the only one holding the knowledge that her perfect moment was already cracking beneath her feet. I stared at the picture for a long time, torn between the urge to protect her and the fear of breaking her heart too soon. The world would judge me either way. Some would say I should rip off the bandage immediately. Others would say to gather more truth before speaking. I closed the app and set the phone face down on the table. Silence could be a wound, but silence could also be a shield. For now, I chose the shield. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the woman in the red dress flashed behind my eyelids, followed by the photograph of Jason leaning into her with that unmistakable familiarity. Dawn crept slowly across the Tucson sky, pale and tired, mirroring how I felt as I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea. I knew what I needed to do, but knowing did not make the decision any easier. Driving back to Phoenix so soon felt like retracing steps into a storm I had barely escaped. But I needed answers, not rumors, not assumptions, not fear. Answers, the legal kind. The kind that helped mothers protect their daughters from falling into ruin without even realizing it. By mid-morning, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a modest law office north of downtown Phoenix. A simple sign read, "Delgado Family Law." Nothing flashy, nothing intimidating. That was why I had chosen it years ago when I dealt with Nathan's estate. Rosa Delgado had been patient, clear, and honest. I need that kind of clarity now. Inside, the office smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and citrus cleaner. Rosa looked up from her desk as I entered. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, her glasses perched low on her nose. She stood with a warm but cautious smile. "Valerie Lane, it has been a while. What brings you in today?" Her voice was steady, but she studied my expression with concern. She could tell this was not a social visit. I sat across from her and placed the printed photos on her desk. She glanced at them, her eyebrows tightening as she examined each one. When she reached the metadata timestamps, she let out a slow breath. 2 hours before the ceremony. She tapped the corner of the print. "And you are certain this is recent and authentic?" I nodded. The photographer confirmed everything. She had no reason to lie. Rosa folded her hands on the desk. "All right, then we need to discuss what this means." I braced myself. Infidelity before or after marriage can affect legal proceedings, especially if they have a prenuptial agreement. Did they sign one? I shook my head. Emily refused. She said love should not begin with suspicion. Rosa sighed. "I hear that often. It is romantic, but it complicates things. Without a prenup, assets, debts, and income get merged very quickly. If something goes wrong, things can get messy." She paused. "I assume you are not looking to dissolve the marriage for her." No. My voice cracked slightly. I do not want to destroy their marriage. I only want to understand what stands beneath it and whether my daughter is safe. Rosa slid the photos gently back toward me. Then let me speak to you as both a lawyer and a woman. Betrayal rarely comes alone. It often brings shadows, and those shadows usually appear in financial patterns first. A chill slid down my spine. What do you mean? She turned to her computer and typed quickly. Without accessing anything private, I can observe public records, mortgage filings, business registrations, credit inquiries, things like that. As she scanned the screen, her expression tightened. There. This is what I suspected. She rotated the monitor slightly so I could see. A series of inquiries and filings under Jason's name had appeared within the past 3 months. Multiple banks, short-term loans, credit extensions, small amounts each time, but scattered across different institutions. These patterns concern me, she said. When someone hides financial trouble or tries to take advantage of a spouse's clean record, this is how it begins. The words hit me harder than I expected. Jason. Hiding debt, hiding behavior, hiding a woman, and hiding financial activity. Each truth layered onto the next until the weight threatened to crush my breath. Rosa continued. If Emily is added as a joint account holder or if her income is used to secure a loan, she could be legally responsible for his debt, even if she had no idea. My heart twisted painfully. Emily was gentle, trusting. She believed marriage meant partnership. She believed Jason loved her the way she loved him. The idea that he could be tying her financial future into knots behind her back made my stomach turn. Rosa leaned forward. Valerie, I need to ask you something. Why is this burden falling on you instead of her? Why are you carrying all of this alone? The question sat between us like a stone. I looked down at my hands. The answer was simple, yet heavy. Because she will break if I hand it to her too soon. Rosa nodded slowly. And what about you? How much more can you carry? I exhaled shakily. More than she can. That is what mothers do. A long moment passed before I added the truth I had never admitted aloud. I paid for the entire wedding. Every dollar. Emily thinks Jason contributed half. But he did not. He never did. He told her he did, but everything came from my account. She does not know. Rosa's eyes softened. That explains why he is so bold. Men who depend on secrecy depend on others taking responsibility for them. Her words stung because they were accurate. I had thought giving Emily the wedding she dreamed of would start her marriage on solid ground. I never imagined the foundation beneath it had been hollow all along. Rosa folded her hands again. Valerie, you are not here to break your daughter's marriage. You are here to gather the truth. That is the right first step. But eventually, this will not be your burden to hold. I knew that, but knowing it did not make it any easier. As I gathered the photos and stood to leave, she offered one last piece of advice. When you are ready to talk to her, lead with the truth, not the anger. Anger closes doors. Truth opens them. I nodded, carrying both the advice and the weight of the day with me as I walked out into the Phoenix heat. The sun felt harsh, almost accusing, as if the entire desert knew the storm I was heading toward. And yet, I kept walking, because mothers do not turn away from storms. They walk into them for the sake of their children. By the time I reached Emily's neighborhood, the afternoon sun had softened into a warm amber glow that draped itself over the houses. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a curtain drawn over something I was not supposed to see. I sat in my car for a moment, steadying my breath. Visiting your own child should not feel like walking into a test you are destined to fail. Yet that was exactly how it felt. I had not planned this visit. I simply needed to see her face after everything I had learned. I needed to know whether she sensed any of the truth beneath her marriage. When I knocked on her front door, I heard hurried footsteps and then the sound of Jason's voice. His tone was sharp, irritated, the way someone sounds when an inconvenience disrupts a plan they do not want interrupted. The door swung open and there he stood, blocking the entryway from the inside. Please call next time. His voice was flat, dismissive. You can't just show up like this. The words struck me harder than I expected. This was the man my daughter had chosen, the man she believed would love and protect her. I managed a calm reply. I was in the area and thought I would stop by to see my daughter. Emily appeared behind him, brushing her hair back, her expression a blend of surprise and mild embarrassment. "Mom, you should let us know first. Showing up unannounced makes you seem like you don't have anything else to do." She laughed lightly, like some lonely old woman dropping by for attention. Her words landed directly in the softest part of me. For a moment, the hallway tilted. I kept my posture steady, silent strength holding me upright. I forced a gentle smile. "I only wanted to check on you." Jason stepped aside reluctantly, allowing me to enter. The house was neat, decorated in a modern style Emily loved. White shelves, gray furniture, a framed wedding photo displayed prominently above the console table. I wondered if she would still frame that picture if she knew what Jason had been doing in the hours before it was taken. Emily moved briskly toward the kitchen. "We were just about to start dinner. You can stay if you want." She kept her voice upbeat, but I sensed a hint of impatience, as if my presence complicated her evening. I offered to help, but she waved me off. I sat at the dining table watching them move around each other. Emily chopped vegetables while Jason stirred something on the stove. They looked like an ordinary couple preparing an ordinary meal. It was almost convincing. Almost. Halfway through dinner preparation, Jason's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and muttered something before walking toward the hallway. His voice dropped, but I could still hear him through the thin walls. "No. She doesn't know about the second account. I'll handle her." The words hit my ear like a sudden crack in a glass. Second account. Handle her. I sat completely still, my breath shallow, the wooden chair beneath me suddenly too hard. My mind raced, connecting threads Rosa had warned me about. Hidden financial activity, patterns of secrecy, debt. And now a second account tied to my daughter without her knowledge. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. He was using her name, using her trust, using marriage itself as a tool. And Emily sat only a few feet away, unaware that her husband was negotiating something dangerous behind her back. Jason returned to the kitchen, his face composed but his shoulders tense. He avoided my eyes as he resumed stirring the pot, as if hoping I had not heard anything. Emily chatted about a new work project, oblivious to the tension that stretched tight across the room. When we finally sat down to eat, the silence felt heavy. Emily passed me the salad bowl with a bright smile. I tried to return it, but my mind was still stuck on Jason's whispered call. I wanted to reach across the table, take her hands, and tell her everything. The photos, the woman, the financial patterns, the second account. I wanted to pull her out of the storm before it swallowed her. But then she looked at Jason with those trusting eyes, the same eyes she had on her wedding day, and my throat tightened. Telling her in that moment would shatter her world, and telling her based only on what I had overheard, without proof, would only make her cling to Jason harder. A few minutes into dinner, Jason made an offhand remark about how people should learn boundaries. Emily laughed and nudged him playfully. I set my fork down, unable to swallow another bite. Jason looked up at me with a pointed expression. "Something is wrong, Valerie." I lifted my glass of water to hide the tremor in my fingers. "I am fine." Emily leaned forward, concerned, flickering in her eyes for the first time that evening. "Mom, are you sure you're all right? You look like you are somewhere else tonight." I forced a small nod. "I'm all right, I just have a lot on my mind." Emily glanced at Jason, then back at me. She lowered her voice slightly. "Mom, please don't read too much into things. Jason is stressed with work." He did not mean to sound harsh earlier. Her instinct to defend him was immediate, automatic. She was protecting the man she loved, even when he had shown her no kindness in front of her own mother. The ache in my chest deepened. After dinner, as I prepared to leave, Emily hugged me briefly. Not tightly, not the way she used to before Jason entered her life. Just a quick, polite gesture. "Text me when you get home, okay?" I walked toward the door, feeling Jason's gaze on my back. I wondered if he feared what I had heard. I wondered if he was already planning how to keep Emily from hearing it. As I stepped into the night air, the silence outside felt kinder than the silence inside their home. The sky above Tucson and Phoenix never truly darkens. It glows faintly with the heat of the desert. I stood on the porch for a moment, letting that glow wash over me. A mother always knows when her child is walking blindfolded toward a cliff, and sometimes the hardest choice is letting her take a few more steps before you pull the blindfold away. The night after dinner at Emily's house, I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the Tucson desert outside my window. Not even the familiar rhythm of crickets could soothe the unrest turning inside my chest. Jason's words from the hallway echoed repeatedly. "She does not know about the second account. I will handle her." It was a warning wrapped in arrogance, and it left no doubt that he believed he had control over everything, including my daughter. Just past sunrise, my phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. It contained a new set of photos. My hands trembled slightly as I opened them. These were from the rehearsal dinner, taken the night before the wedding. The setting was familiar, strings of lights, a small patio, guests milling around with champagne glasses in hand. But there, standing near the back gate, was the woman in the red dress. The same dark hair, the same posture, the same charged presence. Her expression was tense, watchful, almost expectant. She had not only been near Jason on the day of the wedding, she had been present the night before, close enough to observe everything, close enough to be involved. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Why was she there? How did she gain access to a private event? What did she want from Jason? Or worse, from Emily? I needed answers, real ones. I drove to Phoenix again, a familiar route now heavy with dread. Evan greeted me inside the studio with concern etched across his face. Catherine hovered nearby, her expression apologetic, perhaps fearing she had caused more pain than clarity. I showed Evan the new photos. His eyebrows rose. "You saw her at the rehearsal dinner, too. That means she had access to that event. She must have been invited by someone." "Jason," I said quietly. Evan hesitated before pulling up the studio's client email log again. He scrolled, eyes scanning until he found the entry from the woman who had begged for the photos to be deleted. Here. Her full name is Hannah Collins. Collins, not Carter. Relief washed through me for a brief moment, but it was replaced quickly by confusion. If her last name was Collins, why did she sign her email with the surname Carter? Married name. Catherine spoke up gently. When she came here, she was wearing a wedding ring. Maybe she kept her legal name but uses Carter socially. Or maybe she is connected to Jason's family in some way. There were too many variables, too many unanswered possibilities, and each one felt more dangerous than the last. I asked Evan if he had any other contact information. He hesitated, then pointed to a phone number included in the log. "You did not get this from us." I nodded. "I was not here to cause trouble. I was here to save my daughter." I stepped outside, the Phoenix heat pressing hard against my skin. I typed the number into my phone, paused for a long moment, then pressed call. It rang twice before a soft voice answered. "Hello? Is this Hannah Collins? My name is Valerie Lane. I need to talk to you. It is about Jason Carter." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Silence followed. Then she whispered, "Please, not on the phone. Can we meet?" We chose a small cafe near Tempe, quiet enough for conversation, but public enough to feel safe. When I arrived, I saw her immediately. She sat in a corner booth, shoulders curled inward, hands clasped around a cup she had not touched. Her red dress was gone, replaced by a plain beige sweater. Her eyes looked swollen, as if she had cried for hours before coming. When she saw me, she stood hesitantly. I nodded for her to sit. For a while, we simply looked at each other, two women connected by the same man for very different reasons. "You know who I am," I finally said. She nodded. "Yes. Jason told me about you, about Emily, about the wedding." Her voice trembled as she continued. "He and I dated years ago. He always found a way back to me, even after he got serious with your daughter. He said we had something unfinished." My stomach clenched. "You were involved with him during the engagement." Her eyes filled with shame. "He kept texting me, calling me, showing up at my workplace. He said he still loved me, that Emily did not really understand him, that she married him for financial security." I stared at her, the words slicing like a blade. Jason told her that my daughter, who had worked tirelessly for everything she had, married him for money. Hannah nodded. Again, he said Emily came from a comfortable family, that you paid for everything, that she wanted a good lifestyle. He made himself sound like the victim, someone trapped in a marriage built on expectations instead of love. The injustice of it made my breath catch. Emily had never married for money. She married because her heart was too kind, too open, too hopeful, and Jason had twisted that into something ugly to justify his own betrayal. I forced myself to speak calmly, and you believed him. Her eyes filled with tears. I did at first, but then I saw how he looked at her, how she admired him. I realized he was lying to both of us. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I came to the wedding to stop everything, to tell Emily the truth. But when I saw how happy she was, I could not do it. I could not break her heart. I thought maybe he would end things with me after the wedding, but he never did. A painful silence settled between us. The cafe noise blurred into a distant hum. I asked gently, why did you email the studio asking them to delete the photos? She swallowed hard. Because I did not want to be the reason your daughter's life fell apart. I knew how bad it looked. I knew what the pictures would suggest, but I also knew Jason would twist it to make me look desperate or unstable. I exhaled, a long and heavy breath. You are married, Hannah. Why keep seeing him? Her shoulders shook. Because he made me believe he was trapped, and because I was foolish enough to listen. I looked at her not with anger, but with a deep ache in my chest. She was not the enemy. She was another victim of Jason's manipulations. But the final blow came when she wiped her tears and whispered, Jason told me your daughter married him for the money. He said she needed him for financial security and she would never leave him. Those words burned more deeply than anything I had heard. It was not just betrayal. It was cruel. It was a rewriting of my daughter's character, turning her goodness into a lie. I stood slowly, my voice steady despite the pain. Thank you for telling me. As I walked out of the cafe, the Arizona sun hit me with full force. But I was no longer the same woman who had walked in. I carried a new truth now, a darker one I could not ignore. And for the first time, I understood that this was no longer just about betrayal. It was about protecting my daughter from a man who was rewriting her life without her even realizing it. By the time I returned to Tucson, the sky had begun deepening into its late afternoon blue, the kind that seems to stretch forever above the desert. I did not go home right away. My mind was too full, too crowded with truths I could not yet place neatly anywhere. Instead, I drove to Reed Park, the one place in Tucson where the noise of my thoughts always softened. There was a lake there, small and calm, with ducks drifting lazily across the surface as if the world could never trouble them. I parked beneath a mesquite tree and made my way toward the water. The heat pressed gently against my skin, the kind of warmth that clings even when the sun begins to fade. A hot desert breeze brushed past me, carrying the scent of dry grass and dust. I listened to the soft rhythm of wings overhead as desert birds circled lazily, their calls echoing across the open space. Everything around me moved slowly, deliberately, respecting the hush of the hour. I sat on a worn wooden bench that curved slightly from age. Without thinking, I reached into my purse and took out Nathan's wooden spoon, the one I had been carrying since my visit to Phoenix. I traced the smooth grooves with my thumb. This simple piece of wood had fed our family for decades, stirring soups, stews, oatmeal, all under the same gentle rhythm of my husband's steady hand. It grounded me. It reminded me of a life built on trust, not deception. The quiet lake shimmered softly under the falling light, its surface rippling whenever the breeze rolled across it. I stared at those ripples, imagining them spreading farther outward, reaching places they were never meant to reach. Secrets worked the same way. Once they touched the surface of life, nothing remained still. I whispered into the air, though no one was near enough to hear me. If I tell her, she will hate me. If I do not tell her, the pain will be 1,000 times worse later. Saying the words aloud made them feel even heavier. Emily was the child who once cried in my kitchen over a broken toy. The child who crawled into my bed when thunderstorms rattled through the desert nights. She had always been soft-hearted, always willing to see the best in others. Now she had wrapped that soft heart around a man who saw kindness as an opportunity, not a value. Every truth I had learned from Catherine, Evan, Rosa, and Hannah sat inside me like stones. They pushed and pressed and demanded release, yet I could not bring myself to drop them all at Emily's feet. Telling her now would shatter her sense of safety. She would think I was attacking her marriage, not protecting her life. She would cling tighter to Jason, not distance herself. And with his financial secrets creeping into her future, the wrong timing could make everything worse. I leaned back, letting the warm wood of the bench support my spine. A mother is asked to make impossible choices. It is not just what to tell, but when to tell. It is not just what to reveal, but how to protect in the revealing. Nathan's voice drifted back to me with painful clarity. When something feels off, don't rush. Watch quietly. People reveal themselves when the moment is right. He had always known when to speak and when to wait. Waiting was not cowardice to him. It was a strategy. It was wisdom. It was love. I looked down at the wooden spoon, letting the memory of his steady calm wash over me. I missed him more in that moment than I had in years. He would have known exactly what to say. He would have known how to hold Emily steady without breaking her. I closed my eyes and let the wind brush across my face. The desert has its own way of speaking. Not loudly, not sharply, but with a quiet persistence that makes truth impossible to ignore for long. I opened my eyes again, watching the lake darken as the sun dipped lower. Ducks moved across the surface like small shadows. Children laughed somewhere behind me. Joggers passed by with rhythmic footsteps. Life continues as it always does, even when one heart feels caught at a crossroads. I whispered again, more firmly this time. Silence is not surrender. The words settled inside me like a steady heartbeat. I was not choosing silence to avoid conflict. I was choosing silence because the truth needed more support before it was revealed. Emily deserved clarity, not chaos. She deserved to confront Jason with facts, not fragments. I stood slowly from the bench and tucked Nathan's spoon carefully back into my purse. Holding it felt like holding his hand. Guidance, memory, strength. As I walked back toward my car, the sun sank fully behind the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of amber and violet. I felt the shift within myself, subtle but undeniable. The breaking point had come. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that steadies. A pivot, a new resolve. I would not confront Jason yet. I would not confront Emily yet. I needed more truth, more evidence, more understanding of the financial knots he was tying. Only then could I protect her without pushing her deeper into his arms. Silence is not surrender, I repeated in my mind as I unlocked the car. It was preparation. It was love in its most disciplined form. And as I drove home under the desert sky, I felt the weight of that decision settle into place. Heavy, yes, but right. 2 days after my quiet moment at the lake, Rosa called. Her voice carried that careful tone lawyers use when they know the news will shake the person on the other end of the line. "Valerie, I need you to come to my office. It is urgent." I felt my chest tighten. The last time she used that tone was after Nathan's passing, when she helped me manage the estate he had worked so hard for. I drove to Phoenix with a heaviness I could feel all the way down to my bones. When I walked into Rosa's office, she was already standing, a stack of printed documents in her hand. She motioned for me to sit. I did, bracing myself. I have been reviewing additional filings connected to Jason's name. She placed the papers gently in front of me, and something new came up, something I was afraid of. I stared at the documents, several loan applications, all recent, all under Jason's name, but then the detail that made my heart drop. Co-applicant, Emily Carter. My pulse was hammered. Emily would never sign something like this without asking questions. She was careful, thoughtful, almost cautious to a fault. Rosa continued, "Jason has filed 3 joint loan applications in the past. 6 weeks. 2 have already been approved. 1 is pending. All of them list your daughter's income. And her credit score. I swallowed hard. She would never agree to that. That is what concerns me, Rosa said. The signatures look like hers, but the timing and the amount suggest she may not have known what she was signing. Sometimes spouses slide papers into household bills or present forms as something routine. It happens more often than you think. I pressed my fingertips to my forehead, trying to breathe through the rising panic. The idea of anyone using Emily's trust as a weapon made my stomach turn. That was not marriage. That was manipulation disguised as partnership. Rosa leaned back, her face steady but firm. Valerie, this is no longer just emotional betrayal. This is financial endangerment. If Jason defaults on these loans, Emily could be held responsible for all of it. I nodded slowly, absorbing every word even as they cut deeper than the last. Emily thought she had married a loving partner. Instead, she had married a man stacking debts under her name like dominoes, ready to fall. I drove straight to Emily's house. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire way. I did not come to accuse her. I came because I had no choice. Mothers often reach a moment when silence becomes harmful, and I realized I was standing at that edge. Emily opened the door with a surprised look. "Mom, what are you doing here again?" I could hear Jason moving somewhere inside the house, his footsteps heavy and impatient. I kept my voice calm. "I need to talk to you. It is important." She hesitated, then reluctantly stepped aside. I entered and saw a pile of unopened mail on the console table. Bills, statements, a few envelopes addressed to both Emily and Jason. Something gnawed inside me. I moved closer and gently lifted the stack. "Mom, what are you doing?" Emily's voice sharpened. I found a thin envelope at the bottom, half torn open. Inside was a notice from a bank, joint loan. Confirmation letter, approval amount. I felt my breath catch. "Emily, did you sign this?" She frowned. "What are you talking about?" I handed her the paper, her face drained of color as she scanned it. "I never signed a loan application. Jason said this was for his work. Something about a car allowance or an equipment update. He told me it was routine." I looked at her carefully. "Did you read what you signed?" Her hands trembled. I trusted him. He said it was nothing important, just a formality. Before I could respond, Jason entered the room, his expression darkening the moment he saw the envelope in Emily's hand. "What is going on?" I turned to him. "Jason, why is my daughter listed as a co-applicant on multiple loans?" He stepped closer, jaw clenched. "That is none of your business." Emily looked between us, panic rising in her eyes. "Jason, tell me the truth. Did you use my name without asking me?" He scoffed. "It is a joint marriage, joint responsibilities. I needed the loans for opportunities you would not understand." I took a breath, steadying myself. Using her credit without explaining the full risks is not responsibility. It is exploitation. Jason's face twisted with anger. "Do not lecture me. You have no right to question how we manage our finances." Emily looked at me, torn between confusion and loyalty. "Mom, you should not have gone through our mail. That is private." Her words cut deep. "I am trying to protect you, Emily." Jason moved directly in front of me, too close. His voice rose, sharp and cold. "You are not part of this family. Stay out." The force behind his words startled even Emily. I saw her flinch. The room fell silent, thick with shock and humiliation. My chest tightened, but I did not respond. Silent strength. I had learned how to hold myself steady even when others tried to push me down. Emily rushed to Jason's side. "Do not talk to my mother like that." But her voice wavered, unsure whether she believed herself or him. I stepped back slowly, keeping my dignity intact. If I stayed any longer, the argument would bury her deeper in his control. I walked toward the door, my movements calm, but inside I felt something crack. Not in fear, but in resolve. As I stepped outside, I heard Emily's voice behind me, trembling. "Mom, please do not make things harder. Jason is under a lot of stress." I did not turn back. Some truths cannot be seen until the world shakes hard enough to uncover them. Jason's voice echoed behind me again, low but venomous. "Stay out of our lives." I kept walking, because he was wrong. I was very much part of this family, and I would stay in until my daughter was safe again. The morning after Jason shouted at me to stay out of their lives, I woke with a clarity I had not felt in weeks. Pain still lingered, yes, but beneath it something steadier had begun forming. A quiet resolve, the kind that grows slowly, like roots pushing through dry earth. I moved through my kitchen calmly, placing Nathan's wooden spoon beside my cup of tea, as if anchoring myself to something solid. I had gathered pieces of the truth from too many directions, from Catherine's trembling voice, from Evan's unease, from Rosa's legal warnings, from Hannah's confession, and now from Jason's own outburst. The threads were no longer scattered. They were a pattern, a dangerous one. And Emily stood in the center of it without knowing the ground beneath her was sinking. I knew what I needed to do next. Before the sun climbed too high, I drove to Tempe to meet Hannah one last time. She had agreed to see me again, her voice soft and apologetic over the phone. When I walked into the same small cafe, she was already there, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She looked up, offering a sad smile. "I found something you should have." She slid her phone across the table. On the screen was a long series of messages from Jason, not from months ago, from days ago. The tone was unmistakable, manipulative, persuasive, at times desperate. Jason telling her he regretted getting married so quickly. Jason insisted he and Emily were having financial issues. Jason claimed he could not leave Emily yet because it would look bad. Jason begging Hannah to wait for him. One message made my breath catch. She married me because her mother paid for everything. She will never leave me. She needs stability. The lie burned through me, not only because it was cruel, but because it was the exact opposite of my daughter's character. Emily had never needed financial security. She had needed only honesty, companionship, and a partner who treated her with respect. Jason had rewritten her entire identity to justify his affair. Hannah swallowed hard. I did not know who to tell. I felt trapped. I thought maybe if you saw these, you would understand how far this went. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of the final puzzle piece. When I opened them, I thanked her, not with resentment, but with a quiet recognition that she too had been caught in the same web. As I walked back to my car, I felt Nathan's presence near me, in the same quiet way wind passes through mesquite branches. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, guiding. I drove straight to Emily's house with the folder of documents on the passenger seat. Photos, loan papers, messages, everything I had gathered since the first call from Catherine. When I pulled into their driveway, my heartbeat remained calm. I was not arriving to argue. I was arriving to reveal, even if the revealing happened in silence. Emily opened the door slowly. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with worry. "Mom, I did not expect you." I did not say a word. I stepped inside with the folder in my hand. Jason was in the living room, his posture tense the moment he saw me. His jaw tightened. But this time, I did not meet his anger with explanation or fear. I simply placed the folder on the coffee table and stepped back. Silence can be a message, a sharp one. Emily's eyes flicked from me to the folder. What is this? Still, I said nothing. Jason shifted uncomfortably. His agitation grew with every second I refused to play his game. He thrived on explanations, on arguments he could twist, on defenses he could undermine. But silence left him exposed, visible. Emily opened the folder slowly. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the papers. First the photos of the woman in the red dress, then the loan documents list her as a co-applicant, then the bank statements, then the printed messages from Jason to Hannah. The room seemed to shrink around us. Emily's breath grew uneven. Her lips parted in a silent question she could not yet shape. I stood still. Jason tried to approach her. "Emily, let me explain." She stepped back from him, the folder clutched against her chest. Tears filled her eyes. "You told her you regret marrying me. You used my name for loans. You lied to both of us." He reached for her again. "They are taken out of context. Your mother is twisting everything." Emily looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time in a long time, I saw my daughter, seeing me not as a burden or an interruption, but as the person who had been trying quietly to hold her together. I finally broke my silence with a single sentence. I did not twist anything. The air thickened with truth. Emily sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Jason tried to speak again, but the weight of evidence pressed against him harder than my words ever could. I stepped outside before the argument erupted. Emily needed to confront him herself. She needed to see him respond when he could not twist the truth anymore. On my drive home, my hands shook only once when I turned onto my street. Mabel was sitting on her porch, watering her potted plants with the slow tenderness of someone who knows how to care for fragile things. She looked up as I parked. I walked toward her, and before I could say anything, she spoke in that soft, wise voice of hers. Sometimes the quietest step is the one that shakes the ground. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from the release of having finally done what needed to be done, without shouting, without accusing, without tearing my daughter apart. I had simply placed the truth where it belonged, and now the ground beneath Jason Carter was beginning to tremble. 2 days passed before Emily called and invited me to dinner. Her voice was thin, as if stretched by too many questions and not enough answers. Part of me wondered whether she had finally confronted Jason about the documents I left on their table. Part of me knew she was still clinging to whatever story he had spun in desperation. But when your child reaches out after pushing you away, you answer, no matter the wounds, no matter the distance. I arrived early, carrying a small envelope tucked inside my purse. It held the clearest pieces of the truth. Photos, metadata, the time-stamped messages Hannah had forwarded to me, and a printout of the loan applications Rosa had uncovered. I planned to say only what was necessary and leave the rest to Emily. Sometimes the truth does not need a long explanation. Sometimes it only needs a place to land. When Emily opened the door, she gave me a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. The house felt tense the moment I stepped inside. A silence hovered between the walls, as if every conversation in the last 48 hours had ended in confusion or anger. Dinner was simple. Chicken, roasted vegetables, a salad Jason barely touched. Emily tried to create small talk, but the words dropped flat between us. Jason avoided my gaze entirely, cutting his food with short, sharp motions. His jaw twitched every few seconds. He was waiting for me to confront him, to argue, to accuse. He was ready for a fight, but I had not come for a fight. I had come for clarity. When dinner ended, I reached into my purse and placed the envelope on the table. No dramatic pause, no warning. No accusations. I simply laid it on the wood between us. Then I pushed it gently toward Emily. My hands stayed steady. My breathing stayed slow. I said nothing. Emily froze. She stared at the envelope as if it might burn her fingertips. Jason's head snapped toward me, his eyes flashing, ready to attack. But I kept my gaze on Emily. Only Emily. This was her truth to face, not his to control. She swallowed hard. What is this? Still, I did not speak. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and slid out the contents. The first thing she saw was the photo of Jason with Hannah behind the garden arch. Her breath hitched. She stared longer, her eyes scanning every corner of the image. Then she turned to the metadata stamped along the bottom. 2 hours before the ceremony. I watched her lips part in disbelief. She flipped to the next photo from the rehearsal dinner, then another, then the screenshots of messages Jason had sent to Hannah, and finally the loan documents bearing her own forged signature. Her hands shook violently, her face drained of color, then flushed in waves of red as the pain rose from her chest to her throat. She whispered, barely audible, "Jason, what is this? Tell me what this is." Jason slammed his hand against the table, making the glasses rattle. "This is manipulation. Your mother is trying to break us apart. She hates me. She always has." I stayed still. I did not rise to his accusation. My silence wrapped around me like armor, and for the first time I watched him realize he could not provoke me. Without my reaction, he had nothing to twist. He turned on Emily. "You cannot believe her." She is doing this because she wants control over your life." Emily stared at another photo, her breath growing louder, strained. "Jason, these have timestamps. These are your messages. This is my signature on a loan I never saw." He stepped closer to her, voice lowering into a dark, strangled plea. "Emily, listen to me. She is lying. She is trying to ruin everything." She flinched as if the air between them had cracked. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I do not know who to believe." There it was. The moral conflict every mother dreads hearing from her child. That moment when the truth is so painful the heart refuses to accept it outright. Jason pointed at me again, shouting now, "Say something. Tell her you made all this up." I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with calm precision. I did not look at him. I placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder and spoke for the first time that evening. I only said 3 words. "Look carefully, sweetheart." I did not defend myself. I did not argue. I did not force her to choose. I simply gave her permission to see what she was already seeing. Jason's anger erupted. "Get out! You are not welcome in this house anymore. Get out now!" His voice echoed through the dining room, sharp and ugly. Emily looked torn apart, her eyes wide and wet, shifting from him to the papers, then back to him again. I did not fight. I did not stay. I did not plead. Power reversal is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not violent. It is choosing silence when someone expects you to break. I picked up my purse, walked to the door, and turned only once, not toward Jason, but toward my daughter. Her hands were clutching the photos, her tears falling freely. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Mom, I do not know what to think. I do not know what is true anymore." My heart twisted, but my voice remained soft. "Then take your time. The truth will not disappear." And with that, I stepped outside, feeling the night air wrap around me like a long exhale. Behind the door, I could still hear muffled voices, confusion, hurt, lies unraveling. I did not need to stay. The truth was finally on the table, and Emily, for the first time, was beginning to see it. I did not hear from Emily the night I left her house. I spent the evening sitting by my front window, the desert wind brushing lightly against the glass, the sky turning from burnt orange to deep blue. I did not pace. I did not cry. I simply sat still, holding Nathan's wooden spoon in my lap like a talisman for strength. Silence has a way of expanding when you let it. That night it filled my home completely, settling into every corner like a quiet witness. It was almost noon the next day when my phone buzzed. A single message from Emily appeared on the screen. "Mom, he left this morning. He took a suitcase and said he needed space. I think he is hiding something. I need time to think." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. The truth did not break her in the way I feared. It hurt her. Yes, but it had also opened her eyes. Pain can be destructive, but it can also reveal what comfort tries too hard to hide. Later that evening, another message arrived. "Mom, I am sorry for how I treated you. I should have listened. I just wanted my marriage to work." Her apology was soft and hesitant, like a child knocking gently on a door they were afraid to open. I typed my response slowly, choosing each word with care. "I am here when you are ready to see clearly. Nothing more. No guilt, no triumph, no judgment." My job was never to punish her for loving the wrong man. My job was to be present when she finally recognized the truth. The days that followed felt blurred and heavy. Emily kept her distance, which I understood. She was grieving the life she believed she had, sorting through the rubble of a marriage that had begun cracking long before she noticed. She reached out occasionally with short messages. "I am thinking a lot. I am confused. I am angry. I am scared." And each time I answered gently, letting her lead the timing, letting her process in her own way. On the 3rd day, I received an unexpected call from Hannah. Her voice was steadier than before, though sadness clung to every syllable. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "I filed for separation. I cannot be tied to him anymore. Not after everything." I felt no satisfaction in hearing it, only a deep, somber acknowledgement of what Jason had cost her as well. She had built a different kind of dream, and Jason had hollowed it out with the same ease he used to hollow out Emily's. "Thank you for telling me," I replied, my voice soft. "Take care of yourself." After we hung up, I stood by my kitchen sink watching a pair of birds hop along the fence outside. Even the smallest lives seemed to have more harmony than the chaos Jason had created. Late that afternoon, Rosa called. I recognized her tone immediately. It held that mix of professionalism and concern she always reserved for delicate matters. "Valerie, I wanted to update you. I have reviewed Jason's loan activity again. There are irregularities. Serious ones." My heart tightened. "What kind of irregularities?" She hesitated before answering. "Enough that the banks may pursue an investigation. His pattern fits early-stage financial fraud. Using a spouse's identity and credit without full consent is a federal issue. If Emily confirms she did not willingly sign those documents, things could escalate quickly." The word fraud echoed through my mind, heavy but unsurprising. Jason had been building this web for months, perhaps longer. Lies rarely stop at one. They grow, they stretch, they pull everything into their shape until the truth can barely breathe. After the call, I walked out onto my porch. The desert evening was warm, the sky painted with soft streaks of rose and lavender. A breeze moved through the yard, stirring the chimes Nathan had hung years ago. Their gentle tones rang out clear and honest. I closed my eyes. I should have felt vindicated, relieved, even triumphant. But I did not. Those emotions never came. Instead, I felt only a quiet exhale, like the release of a weight I had carried too long. A mother does not celebrate the downfall of the man her daughter loved, even if that man was undeserving, even if he had caused harm. What I felt was closer to a deep and solemn gratitude that the truth had finally surfaced. That night, as I sat with a cup of tea and Nathan's spoon resting on the table beside me, Emily sent one more message. It was longer this time. "Mom, I read everything again. I want to believe there is another explanation, but there is not. You tried to protect me, and I pushed you away. I am sorry for hurting you. He was not who I thought he was. I am trying to accept it." My chest ached as I read her words. Not from sorrow, from the tenderness of knowing she was finally stepping out of the shadow Jason had cast. She was beginning to see clearly, just as I hoped. I responded with the same simple reassurance. "Take your time. I am here." Nothing more was needed. Healing requires space, not speeches. As the night deepened and the desert cooled, I sat in the quiet, hands curled around my warm mug. Outside, a single star appeared above the darkening sky, small but steady. I breathed deeply. The worst had passed. And in the soft quiet of my home, I finally let myself exhale. A week after everything unraveled, Tucson welcomed a gentle morning, the kind where the desert sun rose slowly, warming the earth without rushing it. I sat on my porch with a light blanket over my legs, sipping tea and listening to the distant hum of the city waking up. The quiet felt different now, not heavy, not lonely, just calm, like a long-held breath finally released. I heard soft footsteps approaching. When I looked up, Mabel stood at the edge of my walkway holding a small potted sapling, barely 2 feet tall. The leaves were tender, green and new, stretching toward the early light. She lifted it slightly as if presenting a gift. "I thought your yard could use a new beginning." I smiled at her, warmth spreading through my chest. A new beginning. That was exactly what this small tree represented. Not something grand or dramatic, but something patient, something willing to grow with time. We walked to a sunny patch in my front yard where the soil was soft from recent watering. Mabel knelt slowly, her joints creaking, but her spirit steady. She handed me a small gardening trowel. "Go on, Val. Plant it. Healing needs something to grow around." I dug into the earth, each scoop grounding me. The dirt felt warm against my fingers. We placed the sapling into the hole, pressed the soil around it, and stood back. It looked fragile, almost too small to survive the desert heat, but everything strong starts this way, quiet, uncertain, reaching. As we stood there, the breeze brushed lightly across our shoulders. Mabel glanced at me with that gentle knowing in her eyes. You have been carrying so much for so long. Let this be something you plant for yourself, not for anyone else." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. My throat tightened with gratitude, and with the quiet ache of everything these past weeks had forced me to face. Later that afternoon, as I wiped down my kitchen counters, I heard the sound of a car door closing outside. Footsteps approached my porch. I moved to the doorway, and when I opened it, Emily stood there. Her face was pale from sleepless nights. Her hair was pulled back loosely. Her eyes were red, swollen, and full of something between sorrow and clarity. Before I could say anything, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me in a deep, trembling embrace. "Mom, I am sorry." Her voice cracked. I finally saw it. My arms went around her instinctively, holding her the same way I had held her when she was a child who fell and scraped her knees. Except this wound was inside her, tender in places no bandage could reach. We stood like that for a long moment on the porch, letting the desert wind move softly around us. When she finally pulled back, she didn't let go completely. Her fingers lingered on my arm as if making sure I was real. I guided her inside and sat her at the kitchen table. I opened a drawer and reached for Nathan's wooden spoon. I held it for a moment before placing it gently into her hands. She stared at it with confusion at first, then recognition washed over her face. She remembered Nathan stirring his morning oatmeal with it. She remembered the calm that always seemed to surround him. "Your father always believed in second chances," I said softly, "and I do too." Tears welled in her eyes again, but they were different tears, not the sharp ones of betrayal, softer ones that carried the beginning of healing. She clutched the spoon to her chest. "I do not know how I let everything get so far. I should have trusted you." I shook my head. "No, you trusted someone you loved. That is not a mistake. That is your heart showing itself, and your heart is not something to regret." She cried softly then, her shoulders shaking. I moved beside her, resting my hand on her back, the way I used to when she was little. Healing does not come from tearing yourself down. It comes from recognizing that you walked through something hard and came out stronger. For a while, we sat together in comfortable silence. Emily traced the spoon's worn grooves with her thumb, the same way I had done countless times when I needed grounding. It felt like passing on a piece of Nathan's strength, something she could carry into whatever came next. Later, as the sun dipped toward late afternoon, we stepped outside to walk around the yard. The new sapling stood proudly in the sunlight, its leaves shimmering in the warm breeze. Emily reached out and touched one of the branches gently. "It is small," she said. "Everything strong begins small," I replied. We walked past the fence and into the soft glow of Tucson's evening light. The sky stretched out in long bands of gold and rose, warm enough to feel like a blanket over our shoulders. Emily looped her arm through mine, holding herself steady beside me. I felt her steps slowly matching mine, her breath gradually calming. "Mom," she whispered, "thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled gently. Mothers do not give up. We wait, we carry. We whisper the truth when the world grows too loud. We walked along the quiet street, our shadows stretching long on the pavement. Healing was not linear, and the road ahead would hold more difficult days. But she had taken the first step, and I had taken mine. As the desert wind rustled the trees around us, I spoke the line that had carried me through every moment of silence and every moment of pain. Sometimes the quietest mothers carry the loudest truths. Emily squeezed my arm, understanding now what she had not before, and for the first time in months, I felt the ground beneath us steady again. Do you think Valerie was right to stay silent? If you've experienced something similar, share your story in the comments.